What's up, guys, and welcome back to another Halo Infinite tips and tricks and all the other Forge stuff that I plan to do. So, it might be a little bit different looking because currently we are on detachment, because this episode will be focused on scaling and how to proportion your maps correctly. So the reason I wanted to start off on a map that is kind of pre-made is that you can get an understanding of how scaling works and how you should be scaling certain maps and what exactly scaling does for your level design. So to keep it simple, scaling is the proportion of which your player pretty much takes up in terms of like the map size or how big the player is in comparison to the map. So you might notice this doorway is kind of tall because you have enough room to jump through or something. You might notice that this is almost just barely there to be able to do that jump, because I think if you have thruster you can make it from that rock, and it's designed to be specifically like that. You may notice that this bridge is also the exact kind of width, and you'll have enough room to kind of do your little strafes on there. You can have enough room to do these jumps here. So how do you get started with a lot of the scaling? How do you judge scaling and what is it good for? Well, for one, scaling is very good to pretty much be able to close in the map a bit easier. You might notice that, you took these rocks out and you just completely deleted them. It would just be a flat open area, and you would just pretty much have to cross this entire area just all out in the open. And we don't necessarily want that. And scaling these rocks down to enough to where the player can hide behind them and use them as cover, and, like this, is definitely what we would want. And we want to make sure that these are scaled proportionally to the player, therefore, you could utilize them as such. So how exactly can you tail scaling? Well, that's a pretty simple and easy fix. If you go over to the Halo design set and you go all the way down to, I believe it's player, no, scale object, you get a player scale object. Now, this is actually very useful because when you are making a map, you always want to know how big the map is and how much space a player will take up in that said playable area. So if I set him here, you'll notice that it's quite literally the size of the player. So if I were to this, I think it should work here in a moment. There we go. You'll notice that roughly it's the same size as our current player model. It's just in a TFOS set. So therefore you know how big this doorway, or how wide this doorway is, and how much room the player has to maneuver around. So it allows you to get a scale of not only distance, but also certain sight lines. So say if we were to take him and we want to kind of place him in here, and we want to test the sight line here. So we take him, set him down here, and now you can get a decent idea of what the sight line looks like from down here. So if there's anyone in that window, you'll notice that that is how much distance there is going to be from that window. Specifically, from this window, I have 110 FOV on. If I were to pull that in, obviously it's going to look a lot different. So it's going to vary depending on your FOV drastically. So I think it's about time that we kind of get off of detachment here, and we go hop over into our video kind of canvas. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are on our canvas map. It's gonna look a little different because this is not the same canvas that I used in the original kind of basics video. But nonetheless, let's spawn our player object so we can get a rough estimation of what we are needing to do. So we have our player scale. So how do we use it? Well, luckily enough, there are a ton of ways to use this, and more importantly, there's a ton of ways to scale. But personally, my favorite would be definitely the 4x4. But because we have the Halo design set, we have access to a ton of different pre-scaled objects here for you to completely utilize for every single one of your maps. For context, these are all pretty much pieces from official maps that you have played within the dev set of maps. So if we go under, let's see, what was it? Ramps. You'll notice that there's a ton of different ramps here, but more importantly, you'll have some of the ramps like 1/3, half B. But if you keep scrolling down, you'll notice that you'll have ramps from actually, what was it, Catalyst? I think this is a Catalyst ramp. So this is one of the ramps that Catalyst actually utilized in the early development sections of said map. I think it could also be, I think it's also Recharge, I believe. But there's a ton of ramps for you here to utilize. There's corners, and these are kind of bugged. At least one of them are, because one of them is not rotated correctly, so do keep in mind. There's not much you could really do between just trying to fix these manually. So kind of annoying, but you're welcome to use them if you feel like so. It also is worth noting that there are two different versions of these objects. For example, you have the floors, design floors, but you have the design floors MP, which the MP objects are non-telescoping and material swaps are not allowed. This basically just means that you cannot change the texture of this object specifically. Or I think if you can, they just don't allow the resolution affect it. No, you actually just straight up cannot change any of the materials. So it'll always have this like grid texture, which is pretty much known as the blockout texture. Let's drop him down a little bit more here. And quickly to start things off, we're going to go with floors, and we're going to pick up a quadruple size. The reason this is that this is pretty much like the, well, I would assume would be the normal size of any big room that you would actually play within, in comparison to the actual player. So, like for context, this would, I would say, a little bit smaller, would technically be the pit of Recharge. I would say half of this would actually be the battery section of Recharge. So that's like in comparison to the player. So now that we got our player and we got our kind of like playable area, what do we do next? Well, simple. I'm gonna grab another floor standard here, and I am going to place it right here on the edge. Sure, it's pulled away to the ground for messing anything up. It's on the ground too, and so we have this. Now, usually the way I like to look at Halo scaling is that specifically Halo 5 and Halo Infinite work in a 16 kind of like scaling. So you'll notice down at the bottom I have size 16 by 16 by 4. Well, 16 16x and 16y are essentially, your red arrow would be your x, and your well, if I do it like this, it's probably more. So your green would be 16 in this direction of the axis, and your red would be 16 in that direction. If you scale one side, you'll notice that, you know, it's gonna scale accordingly as you would kind of expect it. Swap my scale. There we go. So say that we don't want this to be able to just be easily jumped on, right? Well, then we got to figure out how we're gonna make it clamberable. And luckily enough, thanks to my knowledge and the scaling, scaling in Halo 5 and Halo Infinite are pretty much almost 1-to-1. I would say Halo Infinite scaling is a tad, little bit more inconsistent than Halo 5's, but you can jump and clamber 16 units in general. You'll notice that sometimes you just can't get up there sometimes, and I think that is either because of camera positioning or because of how much movement you have. So if you are making any type of like jumps or anything, I would highly recommend descend to 15. because therefore it becomes a bit more consistent, and therefore you can kind of see what you're working with. And if we were to throw our little Spartan here, which is 8 units tall, you can get a scale of, you know, how tall a player is in comparison to this, and how much room, you know, this area is taking up. So say we want this, but we'll drop it down to 14, but we're wanting to expand it a little bit. Drop it down to 10, therefore it's still necessary to jump on, but not too crazy. Just for the sake of keeping it a little bit pretty here. This here. My here because my brain is not working. Pull this over here. Do this instead. And we'll do there, and then we will pull this here. Something. Not sure what I'm hearing. I'm going insane. I'm sure you'll probably be in there during editing, but alright, so we have our little platform, and now we can kind of see how it would play. We're down here in this corner of the map to interact with anything. Okay, so we have this little thing here, and that's cool. But now we need a way for the player to get up there. So you might be thinking, well, let's throw a doorway. Sure. So let's add a doorway up here, and there's quite a few different doorways here. I think for the sake of it, I'm just gonna go with a single doorway. It's very simple, it's very clean, there's not much else to do with it, and we'll throw it right there on that edge. And let's say I want to ramp up to it. Well, that's pretty simple as well. Let's just simply go to ramps, and we'll pick up, let's see, we'll go this ramp here. And we just place it down, and it should just fit kind of perfectly right there to right where you need it. You'll notice that some things are scaled a little funky, and that is just to the case of, well, just how they decided to scale everything. You can go in here, tweak the scaling to however you want. Actually, it's the case of this here. Voila, now we got a ramp. We can go back into floors. Floor standard. We can bring it down like such, and now we have a perfectly scaled door. Might look a little weird, but it's pretty much how a lot of this stuff is scaled. In fact, it's probably because of this stuff here. So if I were to fix all of it, like I probably should have done and I didn't notice before, I wouldn't have that issue. So there we go. Now we have a perfectly scaled door. So if I were to take my little player, and let's just go ahead and duplicate him. You can change his color. Let's go up to, I forget which color is which. That'll do. We'll make him a nice little blue going on, you know what I mean? And we'll throw him at the door so we can kind of, you know, understand that he's at the door. And we can take another one, and we can, you know, throw him there, so we get a good proportion of how big the door is and how I will be able to interact with this guy up here. So now we have a sense of understanding how big the map will be. So say I think this is too high, and I think the people down there are probably getting a little too uncomfortable with how high it is, and I think it might need a little bit of adjustment. Well, that's simple. All we do is we will, I don't want green, I want blue. We'll scale it down to like 8, so it's just about the same height as an actual player. My buttons are gonna work. I don't really need to scale everything, I just need to pull everything down. So we can take these as well. Pull it down, and now that I have that model there, and I have the sense of scale, I can also see that, you know, I can see that player much more from here now, and now it doesn't take as much effort to get up here, and now I can just simply jump up. You can adjust this to a crouch jump if you want, but and even players can still like clamber it. clambering is definitely something that can be used in terms of outmaneuvering an enemy. So, yeah, that's generally how you would do anything scaling wise for units. Let me quickly make sure I'm not missing anything here. As for cover, we have a ton of crates and stuff. These things can also be scaled as well. So you know, I'll throw some cover down. Well, but like here, and push it to the edge here. Like right there, that'll do like absolutely perfect. We could do some type of here. Have something going on there. Then for the crates, and then if you go into the actual cover, you can notice that we got some like ankle cover. You can throw on these like railings. Say if I want like a railing or any type of stuff going like so. Granted, it'll be very rough. I don't want to necessarily have all that cover like that, so I'll sit down and we could just block it out, slop it out. Uh oh. Now I noticed what all the audio and stuff was from. Let's go through and hide that real quick. So now you'll notice that, well, now it's adjusted a little bit with that sense of scale, so I can adjust this as I want to freely and say that, you know, maybe I want to see how much a player stands near that cover. You'll notice that I have a perfect view of them from here. So, but you know, it's just the case of you just need to go through and figure out what exactly you're looking for. Say if I want to throw some columns around like here. I want to know how big this is in proportion to the players. So let's grab another one of these guys. I'll bring it over and just throw them right in the middle of it. Go in here. Here. And he's not red by any means. Not from what I could tell. He looked more pink. Pink there. I don't know. Okay. Now we give him a nice like glowy orange. So you can notice that this is how much the player will be in proportion to this area. So I think that's generally all that is needed to know for scaling. There's a ton of ways you can use these guys. Like for example, if you want to make a doorway double the size of a player, simply go into the object properties and under these like things here, you just double the size of the Spartan, which would be like 5.4. I don't know, I'm not looking to like see. Let's start. Arguably, like that would probably be like double the size, but I don't think anyone's wanting that size. So you can just completely scale this however you like, and all this can be scaled as well. So if you want this to be shorter, just this to be shorter. There are plenty of different ways that you can utilize anything and everything. So yeah, definitely be out there, be creative with your scaling. There are a ton of ways to utilize this. If you go around, you can definitely find maps that are very big, but they still utilize their own unique level design. But you can also find maps that are really, really small and tiny, you know, that are a lot of fun. More notable small maps you can think of is Call of Duty's Nuketown, Call of Duty's Rust. Let's see, I forget, there was a few maps back in Halo 5 that also had a very small scale to it that allowed the gameplay to be very unique, very tight, close quarters, and so on and so forth. So make sure you're using the design kit. It is also worth noting that once you have finalized a level, these design kit objects will have to be replaced by primitives, simply because most of these design kit like walls have multiple textures on them, and it is annoying to get multiple textures to line up correctly and color correctly. So once you say you have one of these floors done, you want to go into primitives, grab a block. Doesn't really matter which one. Let's just say the primitive block, and you're wanting to pretty much just scale it accordingly. The good thing about these blocks is their scale is slightly different than design blocks, because they could be scaled pretty much evenly on all sides. So if I want to set that in the middle, I design. Oh no, so this one goes from the bottom up, which is interesting. And now we have that there. So that, and place it, that, do, and then we can scale this down to 16, and boom, we have already replaced said block, and the same can go here, which I believe it would be 8, 6. So therefore, texture is good there. So now that you kind of got your little textures going on here, you can now delete that, and you can go into, let's see, where's it at? It's triangles. We want to print a triangle. So it is worth noting these primitive triangles are a little bit wonky. I'm not totally sure on how you can work with them yet. I have not been a fan of how these things scale. So at your own caution. Honestly, I would say just go into the design kit and just use the floors that you kind of already have in there. So that is my undo button. That was my delete button, my bad. I'm getting stuff mixed up here. So like honestly, you could just straight up keep this block, and you just need to set it for brush. Up at the top, I would expect. No, it is not, because everything's out of order for whatever reason. One of these days, I'm sure they'll fix it, but sand, you want to see wood, which are really not on here. Asphalt banished, floor brick dirty, parapet. Do concrete raw for everything. Just it is worth noting that there are a few textures on the primitives that do have none of their specific textures. So if something feels off, just know that that is because a lot of these don't have their correct texture. For whatever reason. It's a dirt flat. You have grime 0.60, 0.60. Grime, where's grime? Grime. Grime's not here. This is why I'm not much of a fan of this editor currently, because it's in such a raw state. Where is grime? Grime. It is 0.60. 0.60. So, I mean, technically those two should be the same, but that is just kind of is right now, unfortunately. You can also use these as the design grid if you're just wanting to scale everything just completely on your own terms. That's completely fine. You can do that too. There's no harm in doing that. So if I go back here and do design grid, granted, this one's going to look different because it's just completely different like texture in general. For whatever reason, you can't actually find the design grid color in this color palette for whatever absolute reason. But yeah, you're free to color these. Granted, I think Halo Infinite's color system right now is not the best, but you are welcome to do as you would. So yeah, I think it's about time I wrap up this video. I hope at least someone learned something new. There is going to be plenty more. I just have been really lacking on the kind of need to do content right now, as there's kind of a lot going on in terms of what I'm doing in terms of level design, and why I haven't posted any updates for my 2v2 map, which was originally for the contest. And long story short with that one, I just decided not to do the contest because I just didn't feel comfortable with this editor anymore. But that doesn't necessarily mean I don't want to help new players get into level design. It is worth noting that 343 did feature my Forge Basics video, and thank you 343. I highly appreciate that. I've seen a lot of people come through and say thank you for, you know, like making such video to help players get their started on their first maps, and like the designing process and everything. So I'm happy to help whoever needs help in terms of level design, whatever. But if anybody else needs more feedback, you can always just join the Forge Hub Discord server. It's not hard to find. They host all the different contests and stuff like that. So everyone is always welcome there. I peek in there every so often and look at creations. So yeah, I think that will pretty much be the end of this video. So if you guys did enjoy the video, like, share, the whole 9 yards. And if you want more content like this too, just helpful guides on how to do level design and stuff, feel free to subscribe. And you can also ring the bell for whenever I decide to upload, whether that's Destiny or Halo or the whole 9 yards. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, I'll take care.